Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce this evening's moderator, Professor James Danzig.
All right, welcome and thank you for coming. Oxnard College welcomes you, as well as 350 Ventura County Climate Hub. We're so pleased that you're here tonight. Tonight is an important night for you to connect with each other, with environmental groups, and learn about, not just about climate change, but how it's going to affect us locally. So, education is fundamental to democracy. You all agree, right? Yeah. Better say here, you're in church now for that, right? Right? So, yeah, definitely, and democracy is how we collectively make decisions, right? Is that right? Boy, we're in trouble, aren't we? Right? We got all kinds of, climate issues and controversies and lack of leadership. So it's up to the people to bring that leadership. So what I want you to do is get a little more comfortable with each other. You're a little bit spread out. If you're standing back there, come on, fill in. Because we're going to do a fist bump. Yes. So you know a fist bump, right? You kind of do that with somebody next to you. Don't hit too hard. All right, go ahead and do that. Find someone, because you're a community. This doesn't take community. If you have to move around, do a little bump there. Now, fist bumps are good because it's kind of like, I want to make contact with you, but not too much, right? All right, the next thing I want you to do is a little bit stronger. It's a handshake, and look someone in the eye. Say, man, we got to do something about the earth. Do a handshake now. That's a little more personal, right? I was going to do a hug, but we'll stop there, I think. We'll stop there. All right, so people want to help communities. You want to do stuff. You want to work with people. One way you can do that is work in the environmental field. So I'm proud to announce, first time publicly, is Oxnard College is offering a degree in environmental science resource management. Woohoo, yeah, there it is. With that AST degree, it's an Air Associates of Science for transfer. You can go to CSU, Channel Islands, or any other university. So watch for that. We have information at some of the tables out here for the environmental science program. As you can see up there, there's little careers you can do with environmental science. So you can make a career out of that as well. All right, so at this point, I'm going to introduce our co-moderator. It's Kitty Merrill. She's an Oxnard resident and environmental activist. Kitty was voted Ventura County Reporter's Local Hero of 2016. Yeah. So happy to have her. 4 years after founding the local chapter of 350.org, which is 350 Ventura County Climate Hub, she has taken an active role. She's helped put together the program today with others. And it's really brought a lot of the community into the community college, which is what we want. If you're not a student here, give yourselves a pat on the back for coming out to Oxnard College. All right, fist pump yourself if you want. All right, there's Kitty.
Shouldn't we do a fist bump? There we go. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Raul. Thanks to Oxnard College for all their support in bringing this event here. I'm happy to welcome everyone here tonight on behalf of 350 Ventura County Climate Hub. There are some thank yous in order. First, our own Cindy Piester. She's the lead organizer of this event. She's probably running around, but she deserves your applause. So she's been working on this since last year to bring climate action now to Oxnard College. And with that, she's been supported by many 350 Ventura volunteers, especially Arturo Guido. I also have to acknowledge the many Oxnard College staff and students who have been welcoming and helpful collaborators. The support of the members of the Associated Student Government and of their advisor, Gabby Rodriguez, have been critical to the creation of tonight's summit. And thanks go out to the Community College District, and particularly Trustee Joshua Chancer, for supporting and publicizing the summit. 350 Ventura County is honored to be able to partner with Oxnard College to bring you this event. Before we get going, a little bit about 350 Ventura County Climate Hub. Since 2013, we've been a grassroots, nonpartisan local affiliate of 350.org. So what is it about 350? That's the carbon dioxide concentration in the air considered to be livable for humans. We're at over 400 parts per million now, so time is short to turn things around. 350 Ventura works for social justice. We ally with communities affected by climate change, by fossil fuel-based pollution, to support a local and global climate movement to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy and to grow a local food system. We seek solutions that will lead to just and sustainable economic development, resilient communities engaged with solutions, regenerative agriculture, and carbon sequestration, with a vision of creating just and resilient communities in Ventura County, Oxnard first. These solutions have to come from people declaring this is a climate emergency, and that has to come from knowledge and a sense of possibility that there still is hope. These presentations should help give you both knowledge and hope, and then in our workshops, a way to put it into action. These will be in the conference center next door, offered in English, Spanish, or bilingually, along with some fabulous refreshments. Extra bonus. We are one Earth and one people. Unfortunately, wealth has been concentrated in a small percentage of the population. Most of the pollution occurs in disadvantaged communities of color. We're here to talk about changing that. We have a lot of work to do. It starts with understanding the truth about our situation. We're not going to lie to ourselves anymore. Now, if you were here earlier, you may have seen a video of Greta Thunberg. She started a global student climate strike last year. Yeah. Last month, 1.4 million students walked out of classes to protest, and there's another event scheduled for May. She wrote, "So today we walk out of school, we quit our college lessons, and we take to the streets to say enough is enough. Some adults say we shouldn't be walking out of classes, that we should be getting an education. We think that organizing against an existentialist threat and figuring out how to make our voices heard is teaching us some important lessons. The kind of changes that need to happen mean everyone recognizing this is a crisis and committing to radical transformations. We strongly believe that we can fight off the most damaging effects of climate change, but we have to act now. This summit invites us all to be in a learning mode about what is really happening with climate change, what it means for people in our community and in our world. Understanding this climate emergency, how will we each respond? This evening, we will learn how people in our community are taking action and inviting others to join the local climate movement along the way. There's no better way to open this summit than with one more quote from Greta. At the World Economic Summit in Davos, she said, "Yes, we are failing, but there is still time to turn everything around. We can still fix this. I want you to act as if the house were on fire, because it is." With no further delay, let me introduce our keynote speaker, environmental physicist, Dr. Omar Clay. Dr. Clay earned his degree in physics and biophysics from the University of California at San Diego in 2006. I seem to have been behind there. Welcome. Oh, there you are. He studied both nuclear and biological weapons policy and technology. In the course of that work, he realized that environment and climatic issues are the most urgent and compelling challenges facing our civilization. For the past decade, he's been involved in the study of air quality, water quality, and coastal pollution in Baja California. He's the research director at Science for the People. He also teaches environmental science at several universities, where he engages with students from around the world. Please welcome Dr. Omar Clay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. And I want to thank Oxnard College and everybody here for showing up, the student body government, the event organizers, and this distinguished panel we have as well. And with that, I want to start by reminding us all that we are actually space travelers. That's right, we're space travelers, and we share what has got to be the coolest spaceship ever, planet Earth. Right now, we're spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour. We're accelerated in orbit around our sun by about 67,000 miles an hour. And one of the really cool features of our spaceship is that it's almost entirely solar powered. And that includes the life support on our ship. It's almost entirely solar powered as well. The other very cool thing about life support on spaceship Earth is that it's entirely self-contained. That means we don't have any resupply ships on this planet. We have what we have, and we have to make use of it basically forever. To give you a sense of how that works, think about how you energize yourself. You know, you've eaten today, maybe you ate meat, maybe you ate vegetables or fruit, but no matter what you ate, the energy for that food ultimately came from the sun and was absorbed by plants in the process of photosynthesis and came up the food chain to you. And when we think about that a little bit more deeply, we realize that that's actually how life support on our planet works. Our life support system is itself a living entity. The water and the air and the oxygen, the habitable and relatively stable climate, the arable land, the food and the energy that we depend on for survival is all a product of the great ecosystems of our planet. The big forests, the ocean biome, the grasslands. And if we look into that a little bit more scientifically, for instance, let's consider the water cycle, how we get fresh water. Water vapor enters our atmosphere in one of two ways. It either transpires directly off of the leaves of plant life, or it is evaporated off of surface water bodies that have been warmed by the solar energy of the sun. And once that water vapor enters the atmosphere, it moves around, it cools, it condenses, and it may precipitate out as rain or snow. And if it precipitates on a landmass, it may infiltrate and percolate into the soil and replenish our underground water reservoirs known as aquifers. And this is actually the key issue to bring away from the water cycle when we think about it today, is not only is it solar powered, but that water is reused and recycled repeatedly. In fact, that's actually how everything on our planet has worked up until humankind. And so you can see there's a number of really important ecological cycles. I've just put a few of them up here for you to get a sense of. But like the water cycle, we depend on these cycles. These are the underpinnings of our life support system. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the carbon cycle. Because the carbon cycle is not only critically important to clean air and oxygen and food, but it's also fundamental to understanding our climate system on the planet today. So before we leave these life support systems and start addressing climate change directly, I want to point out, and this is what this diagram is trying to illustrate, is that the life support services on our planet are very much interconnected with one another. Because the ecosystems really serve as the basis of our life support system. That means our clean air and our fresh water and our habitable climate are very much interconnected. If you pull on one thread, you end up pulling on them all. And I want to indicate to you how that works a little bit. So if you direct your attention to the lower left-hand graph here, you see two things. In black, you see the human population growth. And since 1900, there's about 5 times more of us than there was in 1900. In the last 50 years, our population has about doubled. In the bar graph, you see water consumption. It's gone up even more than our human population. We're using about 8 times more water today than we did in 1900. And if you look on the lower left, you can see energy consumption. And energy consumption, of course, has gone up quite a bit since 1900 as well. It's actually gone up by about 10 times. And the thing I really want to point out about these things is that they're very much interlinked. So when you use water, you use energy. It takes a lot of energy to get water to your tap. or wherever you're using it. It takes a lot of energy to put water in the form that you will want to use it, whether it's a big water purification plant on the outskirts of a city or if you're boiling water. There's a lot of energy embodied in the water that you use. Conversely, and perhaps more surprisingly, there's a lot of water embodied in the energy that you use. And that may not make sense at first, but the truth is that, for instance, in the United States, about 40% of our power grid is still being powered by coal-fired power plants. Well, to get that coal out of the ground, or the gas, or the oil, whatever fossil fuel we're combusting, requires a lot of water, and it tends to pollute a lot of water as well. So when you're using energy, you're using water. When you're using water, you're using energy. And when you think about these things, you might go, well, geez, how is energy associated with clean air, for instance? Well, when you burn fossil fuels, you produce a lot of air pollution. In fact, we've produced so much air pollution on our planet today that the World Health Organization now estimates that 93% of the children on our planet are going to have some health impacts due to air pollution. So this is a major issue. In fact, when you kind of reflect on these three graphs, you realize, wow, we're using all this energy, we're using all this food, we're polluting our water, we're polluting our air. What are we doing to those ecosystems that are the basis of our clean air and our clean water? How are we impacting them? And if you look at the upper left, you can see, again, two graphs. One of them in purple is the human population growth, but the one I want to point out is green is the extinction rate on our planet. So today, species are going extinct about 17 times faster than they were in 1900. So we've had a real tremendous impact on our global ecosystem and on the life support system of our planet. And because everything is so interconnected, it's important to kind of put this in the backdrop as we talk about climate change today. But let's talk about climate change. First question, is the planet warming? In this audience, that may seem like a foolish question, but let's go ahead and address it anyway. We have about 160 years of direct measurements of temperature on our planet. The 10 hottest years in record have been all in the last 30 years. So that's climate change, that's global warming. Unfortunately, the 5 hottest years on record are the last 5 years. So the planet is warming at an increasing rate. This should concern everybody. Here are those 160 years of direct temperature measurements on our planet. And if this graph looks a little weird, it's because there's actually 6 different sets of measurements here from 6 independent organizations, scientific organizations around the world. So if anybody tells you that there's a controversy about climate change, well, this is what the scientific controversy looks like. This is the level of disagreement among scientists about global warming. And there's not a whole lot. But to get a better sense of how the planet is warming, we really need to understand the geographical variations. So here you can see that the northern hemisphere has heated up a lot more than the rest of the planet. In fact, today there are regions of the northern hemisphere that have already heated up by 4 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a real fever in human terms. And unfortunately, this fever is not going away. You can also see in this graph a couple blue areas where it looks like the climate is actually cooled a little bit. That's probably ice melt off of the tip of Greenland and Antarctica there. And the other thing I want to point out about this map is that you'll notice that surface temperatures on the land masses have increased a little bit more than surface temperatures on the ocean. And that should make some sense, because that upper layer of the ocean, as it warms, it'll warm the layer beneath it, and heat will eventually get convected into the depths of the ocean. In fact, that's what we've found, is that about 90% of the heat energy that this planet has accumulated in this epoch of global warming is actually been absorbed by our global oceans. And that's having a major impact on our ocean biome. And at the same time, what it means is that those of us on land, even though we're already seeing the implications of climate change, we're only seeing a very small fraction of what is going on with global warming today. So let's talk about this climate system. How does it work and why is it warming? Well, climate on our planet will change anytime there's an imbalance in the amount of energy that Earth receives from the sun and the amount of energy Earth radiates back out to space because it's warmer than space. So that brings up the question, well, is the amount of energy we're receiving from the sun varying? Well, it is. The sun is a very dynamic entity. It has about a 22-year cycle. You can see 60 years of data right here, measuring the amount of energy coming from our sun, and you can see that 22-year cycle really quite clearly. The other thing you'll see here is that the amount of energy coming from our sun is not increasing. It is most certainly not driving global warming today. There are other ways that the climate changes naturally. Natural climate cycles, we've all heard of them. These are called Milankovitch cycles after a Serbian physicist that discovered them in the 1920s. They have to do with the changes in the eccentricity of the orbit around the sun and the angle of the Earth's rotational axis. And you'll notice that the time scale on these things are very long, 20,000 years, 40,000 years, 100,000 years, 400,000 years. And these things have had a major role to play in the ice ages of distant past. And so here's 800,000 years of temperature measurement on our planet there in red. And you can see that the temperature of our planet has gone up and down over 800,000 years. And those are largely due to those Milankovitch cycles. The other thing you can see in this graph is atmospheric carbon dioxide. So I want to call your attention to the upper right, and there's a little blue line there. That's atmospheric carbon dioxide today. It's higher than it has ever been in the last 800,000 years. In fact, it's higher than it has ever been in the last 15 million years. That means we're in an era of climate change that we have not ever been in before. And today, when we look at the temperature rise, and you see it again here in black, this is the global surface average temperature measurement. And we can't account for that if we only look at natural cycles. So if you look in green, you can see what it is that the natural factors in our climate would do for a temperature on Earth. And when we put in the human factors, you see in blue that we can actually account for the temperature increase. So what are these human factors? How are we causing climate change? Well, the main reason that the main way we're causing climate change today has to do with the greenhouse effect. And everybody here has probably heard about the greenhouse effect, but let's make sure we understand it really clearly. The greenhouse effect is associated with gases in our atmosphere. So our planet is radiating heat because it's warm, but some gases in our atmosphere called greenhouse gases will absorb that heat, and then they'll re-radiate some of it back to the planet, keeping the planet a little bit warmer. And it's a very good thing that we have a greenhouse effect, otherwise our planet would probably be a very similar temperature to our moon, which is about the same distance away from the sun. However, what has happened is that humans have put more greenhouse gases out there into that atmosphere, and the planet is now holding more heat and it's warming up. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that we know that that's why the climate's changing today and not due to some other reason. I'm just going to show you one here, and you'll see some throughout the rest of this lecture. And that is, even though our global oceans are warming up, our land masses are warming up, our atmosphere is warming up, not everywhere, not everywhere on our planet is warming up. What you're seeing here are temperature records from the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere. The stratosphere is actually getting colder. Why would that be? Well, the reason the stratosphere, or a major reason the stratosphere is actually getting cooler today, is because the bulk of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere are located below the stratosphere. They're holding heat below the stratosphere, keeping the planet warmer, while the upper atmosphere is actually getting less heat, and so it's actually cooling down. So how are we enhancing this greenhouse effect? How are we causing climate change today? Well, a lot of it has to do with fossil fuel combustion, but before we get to that, I want to make sure that we cover the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is, and I mentioned it earlier, is really essential to understanding the climate system. In the natural carbon cycle, the best way to talk about it is probably to start with plants. Plants photosynthesize, they absorb energy from the sun, and then they take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water from their roots and form very high energy molecules called carbohydrates, which animals like ourselves can eat. And they also produce oxygen. So animals like ourselves come along, we eat the carbohydrates, we breathe in the oxygen, we use the oxygen to burn the carbohydrate, and we produce carbon dioxide, which goes back out to the atmosphere, which plants can then reuse to create more carbohydrates. That's the natural carbon cycle. Unfortunately, humans have seriously disrupted the carbon cycle. How did we do it? Well, we dug up fossilized carbon in the form of coal and oil and gas, and then we burned it. And when you burn a hydrocarbon or a fossil fuel, and this is the chemical equation for burning methane, one of the simplest fossil fuels, and here it is in words, what happens is that you use up oxygen and you produce carbon dioxide and you get energy out. So it's very simple. Every time you burn something, you're going to use up oxygen, you're going to produce carbon dioxide, and you get some energy out. And we've been doing a lot of burning. In fact, this is the cumulative global annual fossil fuel carbon emissions since 1750. Today, every year, we're producing about 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That's almost 5 billion tons of carbon dioxide per person on our planet. It's a lot of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a gas. A ton is 2,000 pounds. And we're producing 35 billion tons every year. Wow, where is all that carbon dioxide going? Well, one place it's going is it's accumulating in our global atmosphere. So this is 60 years of direct measurements of atmospheric carbon dioxide in our global atmosphere. And you can see that every year, carbon dioxide levels are going up. The other thing you can see in this graph is there's a little oscillation, a little wiggle. That little wiggle is a seasonal variation due to the great northern forests blooming, absorbing carbon dioxide, and producing oxygen. So you can kind of see both the natural carbon cycle here and the human impact on the carbon cycle. And when you think about that, you might go, wow, if we're producing all that carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels, are we also using up oxygen in our atmosphere? Well, we actually are, and here are the measurements of oxygen in our atmosphere. This isn't something to worry about. There's plenty of oxygen in the atmosphere, but this is yet one more indication that it's humans that are causing climate change today. The other way that we're causing climate change is through deforestation. We remove plant life from the surface of the planet, and they are no longer available to absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. We interrupt the carbon cycle in this way, and we drive climate change in this way. So the scientific summary of why climate change is occurring on our planet today is right here. It's very simple. There's a natural greenhouse effect, which we're thankful for. There's a human-enhanced greenhouse effect, which is causing temperatures to rise. The other thing that you see here in this diagram is that there's three particular gases that are being pulled out as important. There's CO2, which is carbon dioxide, which we've been talking about. There's CH4, which is methane, which we will talk about, and N2O, nitrous oxide, which we'll also talk about. So let's figure out what are these greenhouse gases and what's going on with them. Well, this set of graphs is actually very powerful. You already saw atmospheric carbon dioxide levels going up, so you're not going to be surprised in the upper left when you see 50 years of atmospheric carbon dioxide going up. Unfortunately, on the upper right, you're going to see that nitrous oxide has been going up for the last 50 years in our global atmosphere as well. And in the lower left, you're going to see that methane levels have also gone up for the last 50 years in our global atmosphere. In the lower right, now that's a confusing looking graph there. What are CFCs? CFCs are chlorofluorocarbons. They're a very powerful greenhouse gas. And I should mention that chlorofluorocarbons, along with nitrous oxide and with methane, are more potent greenhouse gases on a molecule per molecule basis than is CO2. But carbon dioxide remains the most important greenhouse gas because we've produced so much of it. There's something else you might notice that's kind of weird about that lower right-hand graph, and that is those gases and the concentrations aren't going up in our atmosphere anymore. What's going on? Well, what happened is in the 1980s, political leaders around the world took the scientific community seriously about the fact we were destroying our ozone layer by emitting chlorofluorocarbons into our atmosphere. They passed an international treaty called the Montreal Protocol and some follow-ups, and we no longer put chlorofluorocarbons in our atmosphere. That is something that we should applaud for. And I guess before we do, though, let's look at this other aspect of this. So we've got three things in front of us in this graph. One, we are radically changing the chemical composition of our global atmosphere. This should be very alarming for everybody. Two, when we behave responsibly, we can manage our emissions. We don't have to do this. And by the way, we did this without any serious economic impact whatsoever. And three, once we do manage our emissions, these gases don't disappear. Those chlorofluorocarbons are still in the atmosphere. It's going to take thousands, tens of thousands, and actually in some cases hundreds of thousands of years for some of these gases to purge naturally from the atmosphere. So this should really lend a sense of urgency about addressing our emissions as soon as possible. So how do we address those emissions? In order to know how to address greenhouse gas emissions, we need to know how we produce them. You guys already know how we produce carbon dioxide. It's through fossil fuel combustion. That's largely due to vehicles, fossil fuel burning engines, but it's also due to our electrical power grid, which is often fueled by fossil fuel power plants. But nitrous oxide is something altogether different. It's almost entirely the result of agriculture. And that's because nitrogen is a very important fertilizer for plants. So when we produce nitrogen fertilizer and when we apply nitrogen fertilizer, we end up polluting both the land, the water, and the atmosphere with nitrogen. And that's the main reason for nitrous oxide in our atmosphere today. The other reason is actually related to fossil fuel combustion again. Whenever you burn something in our atmosphere, if you light something up, you're actually our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen gas. So if you burn something in our atmosphere, you're gonna end up burning some of that nitrogen gas. And if you burn some of that nitrogen gas, you're gonna produce some nitrous oxide. So those are the reasons for nitrous oxide. What about methane? Well, methane is also partly associated with fossil fuels. In this case, it's associated with the mining of fossil fuels, the fracking, and the other ways we have of extracting fossil fuels from our planet. When we do that, we often inadvertently release methane to the atmosphere. Sometimes the fossil fuel industry actually does it intentionally because they're aiming for a more lucrative fossil fuel, for instance, oil. And the other major way that we're creating methane on the planet today has to do with our taste for beef. Beef is so popular that cattle industry is really a large industry now. And there's so many cows on our planet, and cows, like other ungulates, will produce methane in their natural digestive processes. So there's a lot of methane entering the atmosphere due to our taste for beef. Finally, it's also dumps, landfills, where we throw our trash and as it biodegrades, it produces methane. So those are the primary ways that we produce methane. But these aren't the only ways that we have of conceptualizing where greenhouse gases come from. In particular, there's some real environmental justice issues associated with this. Estimates suggest that the wealthiest 10% of people on our planet are producing about 50% of the greenhouse gases related to lifestyle choices. And the poorest 50% of people on our planet are only producing 10% of those greenhouse gases. So there's a real environmental justice right away having to do with wealth. Of course, the flip side of this coin is the poorest populations that are going to be least able to protect themselves and are currently least able to protect themselves from the many implications and impacts of climate change is going to have on our lives. In a national level, it's people from Canada, from America, from Australia, from Saudi Arabia and Qatar that produce more carbon dioxide per person than any people else on the planet. So it's these people actually that have the most opportunity to reduce their carbon emissions, probably with the least impact on their lifestyle. When you look historically, the United States is by far the world's leader in the production of carbon dioxide gases. But that has kind of changed recently, and that's because in the early 2000s, China brought a bunch of coal-fired power plants into operation. And when they did that, their emissions profile jumped. It skyrocketed, as you can see here. And now on an annual basis, China is actually producing quite a bit more CO2 than the United States. So you know now why we're having climate change, how we're driving it, and what's the source of it. But why is this a problem? I mean, we just had a cold winter. Why is climate change an issue? Well, you already saw that the oceans are absorbing the vast bulk of the heat energy that has been accumulated by our planet. But unfortunately, that's not the only thing the oceans have absorbed. As we've increased the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere, that means more carbon dioxide has dissolved into surface water bodies like the oceans. And when it does that, it forms carbonic acid. That means, and these are direct measurements again, that means our oceans are actually getting more acidic. In red, you can see atmospheric carbon dioxide levels going up, but in blue, you can see oceanic pH declining. That means the oceans are becoming more acidic every single year. And that has real implications for the ocean ecology. Marine life that depends on calcium carbonate shells, like these snails, will dissolve in acidic waters. And the keystone species of our ocean ecology really is the coral reef. Coral reef provides this immense range of habitat to an extraordinary amount of biodiversity in the ocean ecosystems. Unfortunately, coral reef are very, very sensitive, both to acidic waters and to warming waters. And so here, the Australian Great Barrier Reef, this is an image taken from the Catlin Sea View survey, before and after. We're seeing the coral reefs dying. The same survey now off of American Samoa. Again, you see that the coral reef are dying. In fact, when you look around the planet, coral reef are dying all over the place. This is an ecological tragedy of epic proportions, and yet another reason for urgency in our addressing climate change. Of course, it's not the only way we're impacting ecosystems through climate. On land, those organisms that can move away from the increase in temperature and move to cooler areas, possibly more northwards or higher up in the mountaintop, are doing so. We see that in Europe. We see it in the United States. We see it around the world. In fact, actually, entire ecosystems are shifting their location because we're increasing the temperature. And so this is something we're already seeing. This is something we expect to see more of in the future. NASA is actually now estimating that without serious climate mitigation efforts, we're going to see by 2100, 40% of our land-based ecosystems undergo a complete transformation. A complete transformation means moving, say, from a forest to a grassland, or a grassland to a desert. So this is by 2100, that's a projection, but nonetheless, this is a serious reason for concern and should have us all thinking about how we can do something about climate change. So that gives you a sense of how we're impacting the ecosystems that are really the heart of our life support systems on this planet. But what about just some of the direct cycle, some of these ecological cycles that we talked about? Are we impacting them directly? Well, let's consider the water cycle, for instance, as a way to just delve into that issue. We've got a warmer planet. That means we have warmer surface water. That means increased rates of evaporation. But we also have a warmer atmosphere. That means less cooling, less condensation, and therefore altered patterns of precipitation. And then we also have a warmer land surface, which means increased evaporation, less snowpack, less ice, less permanently frozen soils. And you already saw that the ocean is absorbing the bulk of the heat energy in this planet. And one of the implications of that is that the ocean water is expanding. Water expands as it gets warmer, and that means sea level is rising around the world. This is the global average sea level rise over the last century. And that means a lot of coastal communities are going to be at risk. Certainly around the United States, certainly here in California, we're already seeing these things. Estimates suggest that California will lose up to 2/3 of its beach by 2100 if we don't seriously mitigate climate and try to work at coastal erosion control as well. What I really want to address with the water cycle is these altered patterns of precipitation. That sounds ominous, and it really is. We already are seeing that precipitation patterns are changing around the world. Over the last century, a whole bunch of areas on land have gotten drier. And unfortunately, the projections indicate that that's exactly what we're going to see in the future as well. So this is a projection. This here isn't data, but nonetheless, The indications are that the continental United States, much of South America, Africa, Australia, Europe, and a big part of Southeast Asia are all going to be much drier by 2100. And even though we're getting less overall rain, less precipitation, the rain that we are getting is in fewer events. So we're getting heavier rainstorms, but less rain on average. And that's actually just not optimal for wildlife. It's not optimal for agriculture. It drives things like flooding, which we're also seeing increasing rates in already. It drives coastal erosion. So these things have major economic impacts. Beyond that, we're already seeing the loss of snowpack around the world. This is just the northern hemisphere snowpack over the last century. You can see that it's declining rather steadily. Here in the western US, some regions have already seen an 80% reduction in snowpack. Now, some communities depend on snow melt during the drier season for water supplies. So this is going to impact the way we use water. In fact, what it's really doing regionally is that we're depleting our global aquifers. So aquifers are these underground water bodies. We've been depleting them for some time. We've been pulling more water out of them than gets recharged by natural precipitation. But as precipitation rates decline globally, our aquifers are going to be depleted even more rapidly. So we're already seeing that. And as you might imagine, this is going to have major impact on agriculture. So this now, again, is a projection. This is only 2050, though, and you can see in this projection that many areas around the world are going to see up to already a 50% decline in agricultural productivity just in the next 30 years. So this is a major impact that humanity, not just for our economy, but for people's livelihood around the world. Now, I should also point out there are a couple areas of the world that are actually going to see possible increases in agricultural productivity, mostly in Canada, Northern Europe, and Northern Russia, and that's largely due to probably the increase in growing season as temperatures warm around the planet. Finally, let's look at this loss of ice and snowpack. We're seeing a loss of ice in both poles. We're seeing a loss of ice in Greenland. We're seeing a loss of ice in Antarctica. We're seeing a loss of sea ice in the Arctic Sea. And most people have probably heard about this. You know, we're going to probably lose the polar bear, except for some zoos, because of the loss of Arctic sea ice. That is a tragedy, but it's not an isolated tragedy. So let's just talk about that for a minute. Anytime you hit an ecosystem, you have a whole cascade that follows. For instance, if you lose Arctic sea ice, well, you lose the algae that grows on the bottom of the Arctic sea ice. You lose the zooplankton that feeds on that algae. You lose the cod and the other organisms that feed on that zooplankton. You lose some of the seals that feed on that cod, and then you lose the polar bear. And that's kind of how ecosystems work. They're very much, all the life forms are very much interconnected. And so this is yet one more reason for us to be very urgent in our addressing climate change and cautious about the way we impact ecosystems generally. That's not the only implication associated with the loss of ice and glaciers. We're actually changing the color of our planet. As these glaciers melt, the planet is becoming darker. So you think about it, you know, glaciers actually reflect about 90% of the solar radiation that's incident on them back out to space, effectively kind of cooling the planet a little bit. As temperatures warm and the glaciers melt, then land is bared, or the sea surface underneath it is bare, and those surfaces will absorb about 70% of the energy incident on them, accelerating the rate of global warming. So this is a global warming-induced change that itself drives global warming. It's called a climate feedback. And unfortunately, it's not the only climate feedback. There's actually a whole bunch of them. I don't have time to talk to you about them today, but the point is that these are very dangerous because they have the possibility of spinning out of control. Yet another reason for us to act with urgency and caution in impacting our climate system. So let's talk about a couple climate changes that you guys are probably more familiar with because they happen here on land. We're seeing extreme temperature and weather events, increased rates of heat waves, droughts, and wildfires, the wildfire season's getting longer. Unfortunately, this is something that we're very familiar with in Southern California region. This obviously hurts not just the economy and the ecology of our area, but it pollutes the air and is hopefully one of the most tangible reasons for people to really address climate change sooner rather than later in this area. So how do we do that? How do we confront climate change? Well, I want to point out, I didn't talk about all the implications of climate change, but all of the implications of climate change do depend on how hot this planet gets. And there is opportunity for us to intervene. So we want to keep the planetary temperature as low as possible, and in order to do that, we have to cut our greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible. And thankfully, there are really, there's evidence that the global society is aware of that. Political leaders around the world have gathered together and signed the Paris Climate Accords and voluntarily agreed that they're going to cut greenhouse gas emissions in their own nation. That's really important. There is, of course, one exception, the sitting president in the United States. So one of the things that we really need is politicians at every level that understand the importance of climate change at every level. And we also probably need to stand up to climate disinformation. There's a very well-funded effort to misinform the public about what's going on with climate science. I don't have time to talk about it today, but if you guys want, hit me up in Q&A and I will talk about it. So in order to address climate change today, we must live within the capacity of our life support system on this spaceship. We have to recognize the interdependence of these various aspects of our life support system, and we have to live within the constraints of these natural ecological cycles that provide us with a life support on our planet. One of the ways to do that is to understand your own impact. So all of the foods and products and services that we consume have energy embodied in them. They have water embodied in them. And learn how much water and how much energy is embodied in the products and services that you use. You can do this. I encourage everybody, actually, in your own private time, get online and go look up a carbon footprint for yourself, your household, look up your ecological footprint and your water footprint. These calculators are available online. They'll give you a very good sense of some of the ways that you connect to the climate system in general and what you might be able to do personally to lessen your impact. Incidentally, you could also do that on an institutional basis. In general terms, what we really need to do is to eliminate waste and consumption in production. So the Europeans are actually really leading the way in this today. They're moving away from a linear economy where you go to the natural world, you chunk out a bunch of resources, you craft some product out of it, you use it, and then you throw it away, to a circular economy where you use some natural resources, but basically your products are designed from the very beginning to be reused and recycled. Actually, the Americans are not completely lost on this. This is the Department of Energy here on the lower right. That's a life cycle analysis there. The idea, again, is that the product must be designed with its entire life cycle in mind. So that means that a product is designed not just to be used and discarded, but used, repaired, reused, recycled. And that is really going to be the way that we can live within the constraints of our planetary ecosystem. And with that, I want to say thank you and thank you for your attention and hand this back over to our very distinguished panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clay. Next, we're going to get a chance to hear from somebody who has been a climate champion in our community for a long time. Carmen Ramirez, Oxnard's Mayor Pro Tem, is a public interest attorney who graduated from Loyola School of Law in 1974 and has had a distinguished career. Her dedication to the city is clear. Never having missed an Oxnard City Council meeting in 8 years. Wow. 9 years, okay. She is now serving out her third four-year term in that capacity and is now a candidate for the Ventura County Board of Supervisors. She was named Woman of the Year for the 35th Assembly District in 2003 by Assemblywoman Hannah Beth Jackson, and in 2009 as Senator Fran Pavley's Woman of the Year for California Senate District 23. Throughout the decades, she has been a leader ensuring a deep and abiding concern for Oxnard youth, the financial viability of our city, its environmental, and its climate change readiness. Carmen.
Thank you, Kitty. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. And I've just been lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And you are in the right place at the right time here in Oxnard. Oxnard has become a legend in confronting climate change and changing the way our city, our community's been treated by the fates that have not always been fair to our people. I wanted to start out by, you got the science. It is pretty daunting, but I'm here to tell you to have hope, because Oxnard itself and what we've gone through for the last maybe 15 years indicates that we can make some changes and be successful when we didn't think it was possible. I like to quote Nelson Mandela, one of my heroes, who said, "It always looks impossible until it is done." Today, I had the opportunity to attend a presentation by Southern California Edison that was about replacing the Puente power plant, which many of you worked on challenging, and we successfully fought. And it's not going to happen. We're going to have now battery storage to replace the energy needs of our community. Battery storage is generally created by solar. So it's a non-polluting, and we hope some good jobs come out of it as well. But it is a testament to the people of this community that you were not discouraged when many people said it couldn't be done. They literally laughed at us, but here we are. We're not going to have a power plant. So I wanted to just briefly start by saying environmental justice is a combination of people knowing that the consequences of environmental abuse fall on the people who are the least able to deal with it, the poorest people, the immigrants, the working people that don't have a lot of resources to get air conditioning, to eat organic sometimes. And it started, I think, of course, with Cesar Chavez, his fight against pesticides in the fields. That was what the grape strike was about. Some of you might remember that, but a lot of you are very young. You wouldn't remember that. And also Martin Luther King joining the sanitation workers of Memphis the night before he died, and their slogan was, they were mostly all African-American men who were working in sanitation, low paid, terrible conditions, still had, despite full-time jobs, eligible for food stamps, and their slogan was, "I am a man, I'm a human being, respect me, treat me right, pay me right, my job has dignity, it's important." And of course we know he was assassinated in that city on April 4th, 1968. But that was a plea, a demand for environmental justice. Oxnard is, and you'll hear a little bit more about it, a city that is very burdened with toxics, and toxics hurt us, hurt individuals, hurt children, babies in the womb, and affect our lifespan. There is something called Cal Enviro Screen 3.0, which you should all know about, which indicates that the city of Oxnard has areas that are in the 98th percentile of the burden of toxics, which is fossil fuels, pesticides, and other contaminants. We have to address that. We have to try to reduce those pollutants in our community. And when there's an effort to put industries or activities that are going to hurt our people, our children in particular, are vulnerable to asthma, we have to say no. But that's where you come in. Nothing that's been accomplished in the city was because of a city council person deciding that it shouldn't happen. It always takes community and organizations. In 2007, a huge mining company called BHP Billiton decided, along with the powers that be, we're going to have a liquefied natural gas terminal here off our shore. The people said no. It started in our neighborhoods. We knew the pipe was going to come across South Oxnard, right at Ormond Beach. The people said no. 3,000 people or so came out to the State Lands Commission after months of effort by groups like CAUSE, like Sierra Club Environmental Defense Center, California Coastal Protection Network, and allies from all over. And a lot of our unions, SEIU in particular, came out and said, no, we don't want this here. And you can't see it, but here's a little memory of that time when thousands of us went out to Oxnard Performing Arts Center and said no, and they listened to us. So make sure that you don't just count on your elected officials or appointed officials to do the job. You have to be there pushing them. And I've been pushed. And because of that, our whole council in Oxnard has been pushed. Our council unanimously fought these things. But before I got in council, there was something called the McGrath Peaker, which is located right next to Mandalay, where Puente was going to go. We tried, the city and the community tried to stop it. But at that point, the actual director of the Coastal Commission, where we went for a hearing, said, environmental justice is not a concern in siting of a power plant. Well, I'm here to tell you that through the efforts of CAUSE in particular, and a lot of other groups around the state, the Coastal Commission has adopted environmental justice policy. They're going to be here in Oxnard at our chambers to hold their meetings in a couple of weeks. I think next week. I invite you to come and thank them for that. More details to follow. So, community efforts count. You know, today at this meeting of Southern California Edison, a lot of people were there talking about how do we develop solar, wind, geothermal. And again, a few years ago, would have been unthinkable to supply this region with renewable energy enough to keep the lights on. But it is here, it is going to happen, and we do not need a gas-fired or two gas-fired power plants on Oxnard shore. But there's a lot more work to do, and you heard about it with Dr. Clay's presentation. But one of the things that's very important is that the environmental justice movement should not leave anybody behind. There are people who work in the oil industry and other industries now who have very high-paid, good jobs. They don't want to lose them. I don't want to see them lose that standard of living. We have to find a way to transition to the new economy where there will be jobs, there will be good, there will be labor rights, there will be project labor agreements, but needs everybody to push for that and not just go for the cheapest kind of product. We have to demand accountability from our leaders locally and certainly statewide and nationally. California's been a leader on a lot of these efforts, and I think it's going to continue to be a leader, but only with the public support and only by getting people who feel the urgency that we need to do these things, some hard things, but we have to do it for our future. We have to do it for our children and their descendants. I always say, we're the ancestors. This current generation now in charge, the generation that's coming to be in charge, a lot of you younger people, we're going to be the ones that are going to be held accountable by history. Did you do what you needed to do? Greta is telling us, did you do what you needed to do? Or shall we condemn you for your lack of action to save our world? We've certainly seen it in Ventura County with the Thomas fires, the Montecito debris flow, which killed a lot of people, and then the Woolsey fires and the fires all over our state. That is the impact of climate change. I know farm workers were working with that in that smoke to pick the crops, because the crops were perhaps to some people as important as the health of our farm workers. Thanks to cause and other people, they got masked, but they were still working in it because perhaps they were somewhat expendable. We can't let that happen. So there are a lot of things going on in our country. We've attempted to exit from the Paris climate accords. It's not in effect yet. Individual cities and counties and states can still express an opinion that they want to be in it. And I would like us to do that in our city. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be paralyzed. We've shown that we can do a lot of things in Oxnard. There's a lot more work to do. You're going to hear from a lot of people working on very important issues. So don't crawl into the fetal position and think that we can't do anything. Sí se puede. We can do it.
Thank you, Carmen. Always a pleasure. Next, we will hear from Adam Vega. He holds a degree in political science from Cal State University Channel Islands. He has worked in rainwater harvesting, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, solar technologies, and promotion of community-supported agriculture. He is the founder and creator of Ventura County Coalition Advocation for Pesticide Safety, also known as VC-CAPS. Currently, his biggest concern is to ban the pesticide chlorpyrifos, which is being used in local strawberry, cabbage, and citrus fields to the extreme detriment of the health of local populations, especially children and farm workers. Adam.
All right, there we go. Party people, how we doing? All right, there we go. So really quickly, just to piggyback on some of the things that Carmen mentioned, the title of this is Climate Action Now. And Dr. Omar Clay did a very, very, very good job showing, where it's affecting, in the skies, in the oceans, in our aquifers. But in essence, where climate change is happening is right here, in the streets, in the fields, where we see the fracking taking place, and we got to change it. They like to say that, we inherit the earth from our ancestors, but truly we're borrowing it from our children. So that's kind of, a way we need to think of kind of moving forward in terms of making this right. The high cost of cheap food. Food's cheap. You can go to Walmart, you can go to many, many places and get it for a couple bucks, a couple pennies. But that comes at a cost. And that cost is felt by our people, our planet, and it's all for profits. So we really need to change our value system, and that's something that we're in essence trying to do here. Very briefly, VC-CAPS, Ventura County Coalition Advocating for Pesticide Safety. If you'd like to learn more, join in the good fight, get in touch with me. I see a lot of VC-CAPS members, some friends, there we go. Thankfully, no enemies, but a lot of empty seats. So what we need to do is make sure that we can bring more people into these conversations because it's really, really going to be important. Coalition, this is a group. One person can't do everything, but everyone can do something. Your life is your story. Live it well, tell it well. And we're doing a pretty good job at that. I think this has a laser pointer. So these beautiful people up here, this is a small portion of the folks that make up VC-CAPS. We're a collective, a coalition of artists, authors, musicians, you name it. And we come together to, fight for farm workers' rights and kind of this new system that we want to see. Right over here, this was a beautiful, beautiful day in Sacramento. We started at the legislator's office. We talked to our legislators. And after that, we marched to the Cal EPA building to say, hey, we're not waiting anymore. No more poisoning, no more studies. The suspicions are confirmed. We know how toxic this is. We see it every day, you know. Our family members need to go through this. And it's something that, you know, enough is enough. So if you're interested, July, date to be determined, we're working on getting 500 people to really shake things up in Sacramento. So please keep in touch with me if you'd like to join. So I'm here because someone came here before me and before them, and so on and so on and so on. So, you know, roots, you need a foundation. When you're doing this work, you need to be rooted, grounded, and, well, what keeps you going? For me, that was my great-great-grandparents right here, Manuel Gomez II and Jenny Castillo Gomez. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here in front of you today talking about this issue. They were born in LA, so they saw LA was supposed to be the agricultural mecca of the world. That's since changed. It's been industrialized, and I fear that potentially the same thing can happen here to Ventura County, and we don't want that. We love our agriculture. They came here to Ventura County in the 20s, and my great-great-grandpa, as did I, went to Oxnard High School. He had to drop out to go work in the fields during the Great Depression. Times were tough, but he did have a very, very great understanding of what farming's like and how we can work with nature rather than against it. What are we talking about? You know, every good story has a who, what, where, when, why, sometimes a how. The pesticides, you know, what are they for? The side, you know, that's to kill. They're designed to kill. German scientist Gerhard Schrader in the 30s, he was playing around like a mad scientist does, figured out that these compounds he was making, hey, they're really good at killing stuff. They kill everything. This is some of the nastiest kind of pesticides that we're using. It's a class called organophosphates. We use this very heavily in Ventura County. Gerhard Schrader, this is the G series, so tabun gas, sarin gas. Any of you guys that played Call of Duty and all that, you know, crazy stuff, you know, this is real. This is poison, and we're using it today in our fields. We need to step away from that. The Nazis put this guy in charge of developing organophosphates, and we're still using these things here today in the county, which we shouldn't be. So we're fighting to get one really, really bad actor. The only reason I'm talking to you about this right now is because it was one of the many environmental protections that Donald Trump and Scott Pruitt had rolled back. Had it not been for that, we wouldn't be using any chlorpyrifos. Most recent studies show we use 26,000 pounds of this stuff here in Ventura County. So what's growing on? So here's the list of the top 10 agricultural counties. This is what they're producing: grapes, almonds, pistachios, milk. A lot of this stuff really water intensive, and most of you know that the food that's grown here isn't for us, it's exported. Dr. Omar Clay was talking about that. We're not only exporting food, we're exporting the water in this food and poisons. So it's not staying here. We're going off and, you know, we're spreading the love. You know, we're sharing this all over the world. And we need to kind of scale that back. Time is ticking, so I'm going to try to go through the 3 more W's. The where, sacrifice zones, cow and virus screen, check it out. It's a really, really great tool. So what we see, you know, usually the redder the better, not in this case, not in this case. The Central Valley, and here we are, Ventura, Santa Barbara County. You can see dark, dark red, you know, that 90th percentile. Last time they did one of these studies of states, 2014, what did they find? Oh, Latino children, brown, young kids are twice as likely to be in areas with some of the highest use of the most hazardous pesticides. This is something that this shouldn't be happening, but it is. Ventura County, hey, #1, but for using close to 900,000 pounds of pesticides. We gotta change that, guys. Our neighbors to the north, Santa Barbara County clocks in at #3, Monterey County, not doing too good either. So why is this happening? They did a quick study. Some really great, brilliant people at UCLA put together this report, Governance on the Ground, and what did they find? Well, they found that people weren't doing their job. That's the State Department of Pesticide Regulation and the current, the ex-agricultural commissioner. He didn't want to meet with us. We scared him away. He went to Monterey County. So where do we see Monterey County top 2? Business as usual. He left. We're feeling really, really good about our new agricultural commissioner. We're making some really great strides. So I encourage you to please, you know, your insights, your knowledge, you know, it's welcomed at these tables in these meetings. So I invite you to join us. They found out that the county agricultural commissioners do not consider cumulative exposure, nor do they research or recommend alternatives to some of the nastiest stuff. So it's easier to spray and walk away and not think twice about who it's harming. And we got to change this. How are we going to do it? The brown revolution. It's all in the soil, guys. The more we use these fertilizers and chemicals, that's not good. Who saw the picture of the strawberries that washed up on the beach? A couple people. Yeah, right? How do strawberries end up in the beach? Oh, the irrigation ditches. Well, when you're not seeing strawberries, there's a bunch of pesticides and fertilizers that are washing away to our beaches. You know, that's not good for any of us that enjoy the beach. So agroecological practices, you know, we need to work with nature, these complex systems. You know, God forbid we win the fight against nature and we beat her into submission, and then we need to take on all these ecological functions. How are we going to do that? I don't know. The common phrase, you are what you eat, but you are what your food eats. And if your food is on a steady diet of nasty toxic chemicals, well, in turn, that's kind of what's coming into our body. Not very, very good. We need to become climate resilient. Agriculture has an incredible potential to mitigate, suck up all this carbon, put it in the ground. That makes better food for us. It's really, really awesome. And quelites, you know, this is a great word that Arsenio from MyCop taught me. There's no such thing as a weed. That's kind of this prohibition-era term, you know. It's very nasty, so we need to change the language in which we're using. There's no such thing as a weed. Call it a quelite, call it an upstart, unknown plant that started growing, you know, like something a little bit nicer. Glyphosate, this stuff is bad. We're taking it to the big agri-giants, Monsanto. So if you can join us this Wednesday, the Oxnard School District is going to vote on this resolution, which we worked very hard on and we can't read too well, but it's going to cease the use and purchase of glyphosate in the Oxnard School District. The county's already voted unanimously to do this kind of, follow the same steps, do the research. So please continue this fight with us. You know, pass this resolution, you know, we can share this. This is a plug and play model, you know. We want to give, we want to share. It's not meant to stay in this room. So know your farmer. I'm also a board member with the Abundant Table. It's a 5-acre community-supported agricultural farm off of Central. So instead of going to Harley-Davidson, make 2 rights. Check out the farm, you know, come pick some strawberries. So we trying to, you know, really show this idea of sustainable relationships between our land and our local community, community-based agriculture, food sovereignty. We need to decentralize this nasty, ugly system that we have, make it for the people. Support your local community garden, you know, if you can support a CSA member, you know, these are the farmers which we're supporting. So thank you very much. I think my time is up. And Tomas.
Thank you so much, Adam Vega. Next, we are going to hear from Tomas Morales-Rebecki, a graduate of San Diego State University with a bachelor's degree in political science and Spanish. He's a senior Central Coast organizer for Food and Water Watch. Based in Oxnard and Ventura, he works in local communities and statewide organizations to ban fracking. He worked in his home county of San Benito as the field director and co-campaign manager for Measure J, the first successful voter initiative in California to ban fracking, cyclic steam injection, and acidizing at the county level. Tomas.
Thank you, Kitty, and thank you, everybody, for putting this great event together. So once again, my name is Tomas Morales-Rebecki, and I'm the senior organizer for Food and Water Watch. And Food and Water Watch, we're a national nonprofit. Our mission is to champion healthy food and clean water for all. We stand up to corporations that put profits before people and advocate for a democracy that's truly representative and protects our environment. So what does that mean? So we work on a lot of different issues, from food and water, from stopping water privatization and Nestle, to stopping factory farms too and the harms they do to polluting our water, but also impacting climate change. But one of our major focuses is the fight of our lives. It's climate change, and we've focused a lot more on climate change and specifically fracking over the past 10 years. Food and Water Watch was actually one of the first organizations nationally to come out to call for a complete ban on fracking over 10 years ago. So I know it's already been mentioned a couple times, but let's see how many people here have actually heard of fracking. Okay, great. That's a good amount. How many of you have heard about cyclic steam injection? Oh, wow, we have a pretty educated crowd. And how about acidizing? So these are all three forms of extreme extraction. Basically, all of our easy-to-get oil has been used up. A typical oil well, you drill a hole into the well, like drill a hole into the ground, like a straw, the oil comes up, the real light, easy to get, clean or crude, they call it. So all those reserves are gone. So the majority of oil and gas, especially here in Ventura County, is tight oil. It's oil and gas that's trapped inside rocks, or it's trapped inside tar sands, which is as thick as peanut butter. So it takes a heavy amount of pressure, energy, water, and chemicals, many that we don't even know what they're using to break apart these formations and free up this oil and gas. So it takes a lot of energy just to free it up in the first place, and it creates a lot of pollution along the way, air pollution, water pollution. It can also cause earthquakes. So there's so many reasons why, when we should be transitioning away from these techniques, that this is taking us in the complete opposite direction. And unfortunately, here in the US, it's been sold to us as a bridge fuel. It's cleaner than coal, so we should use natural gas instead. But actually, recent studies are showing that when you add up all the emissions that come out when you drill a well, when you pipe it to power plants like here in Oxnard, it actually is worse than coal. Methane, like Dr. Omar Clay was talking about, is actually 80% worse of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So this bridge fuel is taking us in the complete opposite direction. It's a bridge fuel to nowhere. And actually, the US is poised to export more oil and gas this year than Saudi Arabia. So the other argument has been, we got to drill for it here so we don't import it from other countries that hate us. But we're now exporting large amounts of oil and gas, especially the oil and gas that's produced here in Ventura County, which is a lot more the dirtier, carbon-intensive oil. So we can't even burn it here in California because we have low-carbon fuel standards. So here's a map of all the oil drilling that has happened in the past. The green is the current active oil wells. This is Ventura on the west side by where I live. This is Oxnard. As we see, there's a lot of active, plugged, and the pink wells are actually wells that have been fracked. We have over 3,000 active wells here in the county of Ventura. Over 300 of them have been fracked, but cyclic steam injection is actually the method that's more preferred to get a lot of this tighter, dirtier oil out of the ground. So I'm gonna, with my brief time, there's a lot of different projects, and you can come talk to us later at our workshop, and we can talk more about a lot of the projects that we're fighting locally. But this is a project that's very relevant to you all because it's the Cabrillo oil field. We're within 2 miles of the Cabrillo oil field. This oil field is going after, like I said, some of the dirtiest, most polluting oil. And an oil company, Renaissance Petroleum, wants to drill up to 35 new oil wells within 1,600 feet of a community right here. There's hundreds of people that live in this area. But also, just like everyone's been mentioning, Cal EnviroScreen has labeled this area as a disadvantaged community because they have large sources of pollution. There's strawberry fields to the left, to the right, and there's lots of current oil and gas wells. So this is not the place we should be drilling for it. It's not the time we should be drilling for it. So thankfully, Sea Frog, another great local organization that I sit on the board of too, and Food and Water Watch, we combined forces and are appealing these wells that they've been approved. And we're going to be having a hearing before the Board of Supervisors at the end of July. They just gave us the date this week. It's going to be July 23rd. And we'll be fighting before the County Board of Supervisors to make sure that they don't approve these wells. I see I already ran out of time. I can't get through all my stuff. But yes, please join us at the workshop afterwards so we can talk more about these projects. But I'm going to quickly go through a couple of my slides to get to. These are other communities that have taken it upon themselves to ban fracking and other harmful extractions throughout the U.S. Over 8 other counties here in California have banned it, including, like we mentioned, my home county of San Benito back in 2014. They outspent us 15-1. They spent over $2 million in our small rural county, but we still passed the ballot initiative with 60% of the vote because you can't spend enough money to convince people to pollute their own water. So in the end, people power is definitely more powerful than all the money that they have. So this is just one example of how we can do it. So these are just a list of a couple of the projects that are coming up on the way. I can talk about them more in our workshop later. But other ways to get involved, please sign our petitions outside, get on our mailing list. We let you know when there's important meetings, important hearings to make sure that we stop this expansion and pollution of our resources in our community. You can volunteer to sign up to canvass. We've canvassed all the homes closest to these projects to make sure they're aware of it, get them to sign petitions, getting them to speak at the hearings, so we're always going to be doing canvassing. Oh, went to the next slide. And then you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram too, or text this too, and you'll be opted in to get text messages too, because that's the best way to communicate these days. All right, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Tomas. Very good. Next, we're going to hear from Lucia Marquez. She's a community organizer and policy advocate for Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy, or CAUSE, as you may know it. She grew up in Santa Paula and graduated from Santa Paula High School, Ventura College, and the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she majored in community studies. Go Slugs. Lucia is working with community as she pursues her passion for immigrant rights and social and environmental justice. Welcome.
Ooh, good evening, everyone. So my voice has been going in and out all day, so please bear with me. I'm going to try to keep it alive as much as possible. Like I was introduced, I'm a community organizer and policy advocate with CAUSE here in Ventura County, where I'm doing a lot of work around environmental justice. And it's really exciting talking about environmental justice in the community of Oxnard, because that's where we've done a lot of our historic work. And so today I'm kind of talking about how communities of color are really on the front lines of climate change. When we're looking at who faces the biggest burdens of climate change and pollution, we're looking at low-income communities of color who are always disproportionately impacted by heavy pollution. And when we're looking at that disproportionate impact of pollution, what we're calling that really is environmental racism. When you think of environmental racism, what that is when institutions, policies, corporate decisions are being targeted towards communities for undesirable land uses and projects where the result is communities are being exposed to toxic waste and hazardous pollution that is impacting their lives every day. And so when we see environmental racism, where we're seeing that happen is in communities that are typically referred to as disadvantaged communities. We've heard that term referred to by many of the speakers today. And so when we think of disadvantaged communities, we have one here in Ventura County. We have actually many, but South Oxnard is actually one of the most vulnerable disadvantaged communities in our county. And if you think about why, well, South Oxnard has a coastline of 3 power plants on the coast of its beaches. We have 2 naval bases. We have 1 deep water port. We have a sewage plant. We have several formal landfills and old dumping sites, including 1 EPA Superfund toxic waste site. That's a lot of pollution, all targeted in 1 community. This is all in South Oxnard. And so when you think about the burdens of pollution that this community is being exposed to, what also is being experienced in these communities is high unemployment, heavy poverty, also a lot of households that are non-English speaking. And then when we look at the demographics, is it a coincidence to us that this community is 75% Hispanic? It's not, you know, it's environmental racism. It is, it's targeted. This community is a dumping ground, and it's not a coincidence that a lot of these projects are concentrated in 1 area. And so when you think about all of these burdens in these communities, is what happens when you have all of that pollution with high unemployment and poverty is that usually a lot of these communities don't have the means for health insurance or health care. So when we have all of this pollution, you're also having a lot of health burdens and health impacts, but these communities don't have access to take care of themselves. Also, when you think about, you know, when our communities are Spanish-speaking. Typically, those are the communities that are not engaged, and we know that that's happening. Thinking about the Thomas Fire a few years ago, all the alerts that were sent out informing the communities of what was happening, they were not sent out in Spanish. Think of how much of our communities were not engaged and not informed about something that was drastic that was happening in their communities. So this is what we know is going on. This is the state of what our community is. And so what is it that we're doing to improve it? What is it that cause, the organization that I represent, what is it that we're doing to fight climate change in South Oxnard? And what we have done is that we fought for 5 years to oppose the Puente power plant, which Carmen shared that we won that fight. There's not going to be, yes. It took 5 years, but it was something that we did not want another power plant on the coast of our beach. We did not want to further pollute our air, our community, and our people. We also are working to restore Ormond Beach and the wetlands in South Oxnard, where the wetlands are something that help us fight climate change and its natural ecosystem. And then we're also working on ongoing work to minimize industrial pollution and expansion into South Oxnard. But most importantly, we're engaging community. That's an environmental justice value where community has a say, community is engaged, because the people that are being most impacted deserve to have a say of what goes into their community and what their communities look like. When fighting this fight of climate change, what we really need to do is bridge climate change and environmental justice. As climate change worsens, it will be low-income communities of color who lack the means to, evacuate when emergencies and disasters happen. It'll be these communities that don't have access to health care to treat the conditions that are brought on by the pollution that is in their communities. And so when we see more intensity of climate change, what we really need to examine is the systemic injustices that are put onto our communities. And so when we're fighting climate change through environmental justice, we're not just looking at the environment, but we're also looking at the intersections of economic justice, social justice, health justice, because it's not just about the environment, it's also about the people. So, thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Lucia. Our final speaker will be Jim Danza. He's an assistant professor of geography and environmental sciences. If he looks familiar, it's because he introduced you at the beginning of this evening. He's a certified urban planner, active in the environmental community, and for over 25 years, he's sought restoration of local water resources, such as the Los Angeles River and our own Santa Clara River. And he is also chair of the nonprofit Friends of the Santa Clara River. Jim.
All right, time to bring it home, right? It's home to you guys. You can. That's the acronym. Isn't that perfect? All right. Climate action now. So we're going to talk about the now. Now, what's going on? This is the Arctic Ocean. It's white, or supposed to be white. Watch how this changes. This starts in around 1998, I think it was. And you'll see the ocean currents moving ice around. The white is permanent ice. Well, it's supposed to be permanent. Year 2006. The gray areas is summer ice that comes and goes. All right, get to the point where I start to cry. I think of Frosty the Snowman melting. So that's a 2016 minimum, and it's even worse now. Before, after. Yes, the color of the planet is changing. Heat waves kill more people than any other kind of weather event. Forget hurricanes, tornadoes, it's heat waves. Europe has had tens of thousands of people die in heat waves in recent times. Famous heat waves in the United States was in Chicago. So it affects more people than you realize. Imagine if you live in the tropics. Yes, it is getting warmer. You can see the temperatures rising over time. This is 1880 to 2011. This is sea level rise. The sea is already rising. These are in millimeters, so it's small amounts. It's adding up to about 9 inches since 1800s. Trouble is, the end of the graph gets steeper. Accelerating rate of rising is what that means. This is a graph that shows for Miami Beach. Right in here, you'll see where we're at right now. It's just starting to happen, but they're already getting flooding when it's not raining. This is seawater coming in through storm drains backwards onto the city streets. Because of this, they're spending $1 billion to raise city streets. That's the plan. They don't want to move. They love their lifestyle. So impact on you, changing weather patterns. This is data I pulled from the National Weather Service. This is temperatures locally, coastal California. Now, some of it is due to just cities. Cities generate heat, smog traps heat, but you can see that it's rising locally. It's not your imagination if you live in Camarillo or inland. We never needed air conditioning before, but now you do. Or is it a trend that's actually steepening? Maybe that's more of the line of trajectory. So what's your impact on you? Energy costs. Health impacts. Precipitation trends were covered earlier. We're drying out here in the West. This is our drought cycle, getting worse over time. The yellow is more droughts, but also the rainfall's changing. That's the green part. It's peaking higher at times. So with more droughts, more fires, insurance costs are rising. If you own a house, you know what I'm talking about. Air quality and taxes. How are we going to pay for all the damage and infrastructure changes? And this is looking at rainfall. Since 1970, the storms are getting worse locally. Floods are a problem to consider with that. This is the floodplains of Oxnard area. We have them mapped, but we need to change the maps and worry about this more. So floods are an issue. Snowpack, the Sierra Nevadas, snow back here in recent times. This is a projection. We're losing our snowpack. That's where our drinking water and farm water comes from, is the snow melt. So higher food prices. The last drought, food prices went up 10%, just in the previous drought. I don't know which one. This is the most recent one. Right? Coastal erosion. Where did the beach go? Now this is the intermediate scenario of sea level rise for this area. You'll recognize Port Hueneme there, and we're over here in South Oxnard. So this is year 2040. 1 foot of sea rise is predicted. Not too far away, is it? And what you're seeing here is areas that would be inundated if the sea can get into here. May not. If the beach gets breached, then it would come in. This is year 2060. I can't do the math. I think I'll be alive then. Well, I don't know. Hopefully I will be. But yeah, higher insurance costs. Year 2080, 3 feet of sea rise. Blue areas are inundated because the beach is breached. And this is 4 feet, year 2100. Again, the intermediate scenario, not the worst case. If you go to the high case, we have major issues. So we got to think about how we build our cities and what we're going to start doing about it. This is going to happen, even if we did everything possible. So yeah, ouch is the stamp. Sorry about that. All right, so how will we cope? Comic relief. Whew. That was getting scary there. Professor's plan, give up, move out, but where, he won't say. I guess I have my secret plan. Action, how do I get people to take action? We could hypnotize, maybe. Could stare into the circle. Take action, take action. All right, data, we could use data. We could try to stretch out the graph so it looks worse maybe, I don't know. But data doesn't always work. But discuss climate change, the stuff you've learned today. Talk to other people, friends and family, even at Thanksgiving with that uncle that doesn't believe it. All right, so keep learning. I'm going to do another presentation on climate change in the fall, and I made a movie to go with it called Alaska's Melting. You don't get to see the movie, but you get to see the promo. We're in Hollywood now. All right, so come back November 7th, right here, 4 p.m. Put it in your iPhone right now. All right, so what can you do? Lights at home. They use electricity generated mostly from natural gas right now. Go shopping to buy solar panels only, though. All right, don't drive too much. All right, cooling and heating, you know what to do. You shop too much, don't use it as medication, go buy solar panels. All right, eat healthy, you already got that message. So it's up to you, demand action from political leaders. We've got a great one here. Work on the other ones. All right, correspond with public agencies. Get involved in what's going on. Participate, you got all the nonprofits out here. All right, drive less. Help the earth in some way. Even on campus, this is our native plant garden. Give an applause to ASG, it was their idea. We got a garden going out here. Captures stormwater. All right, go to the events. You'll learn about those out there today. Do what I did. Meet with politicians. Look at that. I mean, get the presidents involved and had a different hairdo then. All right, you look, I even got Trump to plant a tree. That's pretty good. All right, so final thought. Will the world community reduce? What will you do? All right, thank you very much. Don't forget to come back. All right, so we're going to open it up to questions next. All right, so Kitty's going to come around with a microphone. We can only take about 2 questions, I think, because we're a little bit late on time. Katie, you go ahead. We'll open up to the panel.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. So I was looking up Wikipedia about individual actions we can take on climate change, and I was glad that you put something up there on the screen that showed some individual actions we could take, but all of these seem like very low impact. And what it says in Wikipedia is the biggest impact we can have is reducing our family size and reducing the number of children we can have. And I wondered what comments you have on that and what action you're taking towards that.
Right.
You want to take that? Dr. Clay, you want to?
That's a true statement, I guess. I don't have any children, and I've chosen not to.
Yeah.
I don't have any children either.
If y'all like to read, you like books, there's a really good book by Paul Hawken, Drawdown, and family planning is part of that. So
I'll add to that, though, that better economy means fewer children are born. As we help bring up the rest of the world economically, fewer births occur.
Absolutely, and that comment Adam Vega made, Drawdown, is also on a website, and they've got a list of 50 things you can do to help save the
Can I
planet.
just add to this, Kitty? Reproductive rights are very important for women all over the world, And right now, our government, under the current administration, is opposing family planning. People have children all over the world because they need them to help support. If they had women had better choices in marriage and family planning, they wouldn't have as many children.
I'm gonna follow up on the Mayor Pro Tem on that, and that is to say, although it is true that population growth is a major problem, it really is the wealthiest people that have the greatest impact. And so even though we really do need to work on family planning around the world, it's the wealthiest people that can really reduce our impact. So it's not just population growth, it's what we do as a population.
Thank you. Not to short-circuit anybody, but we've limited amount of time for questions because we want to be able to get you into workshops. We're going to take one more question.
I was going to say birth control.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other questions? I think we had one announcement from ASG. They want you to know they've got fabulous terrariums that are being available, and here's a person who will tell you more about fabulous terrariums and how you can get a hold of one.
Yay! So in appreciation of the environment and the fact that we're here, which means we're alive, so that's always a good thing, right? And not just human life, but also animal life, life in general, plant life. Thank you so much. We put, in behalf of the Chemistry Club, we put a big 20-gallon terrarium, which we're raffling at $5 a ticket, or 3 tickets for $10. And every $250 that we get, the Oxnard College Foundation matches a scholarship for the students, which means more education, more money for those that need the help. And that's right here on the side. And also Women in STEM. There's a great
yes, so in regards to Women in STEM and all STEM students here at Oxnard College, we're also doing a workshop where we're basically recycling any type of plastics or cans that we had found, and we're planting succulents in them. So we'll be at the same table with Chemistry Club, so you guys can find us there, and any donations obviously are going to go to the students as well. So you guys are all welcome to come and join.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and then we'll do a wrap-up. So next door we have workshops. It's by table. There's different environmental groups, more than the ones you've seen up here. There's like over 10, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you go in there, you get to meet and greet and find out what they do, maybe sign up for something and hear their pitch, interact with them. That goes until 8 o'clock. There's fruit cups or something going on in there, so if you're hungry, I'll help out. So let me do the thank yous. So number one, ASG. They signed up to make this happen, so thank the students that made it happen. All right. The environmental community came out tonight. You guys were here. Awesome. And 350 VC Climate Hub with Kitty and Cindy and everybody. Thank you. And a big round of applause for our panel. All right. Awesome job. Thank you very much.